About this, joining us now to discuss the latest developments in the Derek Chauvin trial is retired LAPD Sergeant Cheryl Dorsey. Cheryl, thanks for being with us. Let me ask you, we've been talking with you. The sergeant on up to the chief have now testified. What kind of damage did the chief do today?
He did a lot. A very compelling testimony. You've got a sergeant, a patrol sergeant whose job it is to evaluate uses of force, manage scenes like the one that Derek Chauvin found himself in. We've heard from a lieutenant, a commander, and today the police chief. And what the defense is trying to do is minimize and mitigate their experience. Well, Chief, you haven't been in patrol in a long time, and when you went through training, it was a little bit different. But what we know is that the force was unreasonable, no matter when you were last in uniform. No one teaches you to put a knee on a neck and sit there for 9 minutes unless you're trying to punish them. As in the case of Derek Chauvin punishing Mr. Floyd. And so they're going to have a very tough hill to climb to overcome the credibility of a police chief who's clear and firm on what his department's policy is.
Well, and so often we've seen there be a struggle to convict officers, Sergeant Dorsey, in the past. But in this case, the top officers are on the side of the prosecution, which makes this a little more complicated, right?
Well, I don't know that it necessarily makes it any more complicated. I would think at the very least it makes it very easy
or simple,
to convict this officer. Yeah, I mean, when you've got the chief of police saying that's not what we teach, I don't condone that. And certainly it violates our policies and procedures. It's very difficult for anybody credibly to argue with the police chief about what his officers are expected to do. And listen, I think there's certainly a consciousness of guilt. Now we know that officers didn't even have on their body-worn camera. We heard Chauvin minimize and mitigate the use of force to the sergeant when he responded. And so they're going to have some explaining to do when the defense takes when they put their case on in chief.
You watch a lot of police work and talk about it now. I'm wondering if you have any thoughts on the doctor testifying today and what he had to say and what the defense can do to, mitigate the damage there.
It's just damage on top of damage on top of damage. We heard from the ER doctor that Mr. Floyd died from asphyxiation. How do you argue against that? We heard from paramedics who were there on the scene who said we basically transported a deceased man. We had a firefighter off duty who said that I was there and able to render aid, but for they wouldn't allow it. And so you've got all of these professionals on top of the civilians who one might argue may not know, may not understand because they're not police or they're not paramedics, but we're hearing from medical professionals. And so this is all very damning, very compelling. But listen, the defense is going to have their turn, and all they need to do is convince one person that, maybe that was reasonable what Chauvin did, and hang it up.
So do you have a prediction at this point?
Listen, I don't have a prediction, but I'm a realist, and I know that juries have a hard time convicting police officers because they believe that what we do is difficult, and they give great deference to our version. I don't expect that we will hear from Chauvin, but I think through questions and testimony of others, the defense is going to present a picture that Mr. Floyd is scary, he's a big man, he was on drugs, and he is the reason, and him alone, for his death. And so all you need is one juror to agree.
All right, about 3 more weeks to go. Retired LAPD Sergeant and author Cheryl Dorsey, we thank you for your perspective.
Thank you.